Before we get started, one, it looks like everybody has the book. Raise your hand if you have read at least a part of this book. If you've read some of it. Excellent. Raise your hand if you've finished it. Wow, most people. Okay, awesome. Hands down. Great. So you don't need to know much about this one, but I'll tell you a little bit about this one, and then I'll tell you something else. Before I do that, I have to give you a warning. As most of you know, I guess all of you know, things happen in my books that can be kind of creepy, kind of freaky, kind of bloody, right? When I tell stories, and I'm going to tell you guys a story today, when I tell stories to kids, I tell stories that can be equally freaky, creepy, bloody. If I get to a point in the story that I'm telling you guys today that you don't want to hear, you feel a little freaked out, a little bit sick to your stomach, you're just not in the mood to hear it for whatever reason, this is what I want you to do. I'm very serious about it. I want you to take 2 fingers, show me 2 fingers. I want you to close your ears, don't stick them inside, there's not a jacket, just close them, and look in your laps. And you can count to 5 or to 10, and by the time you finish counting, I will be done with the gross or the freaky part, and we will be good to go. And some of you are like, I'm not going to need to close my ears to hear an awful talk. I don't think I've ever done a talk where somebody didn't feel the need at some point to just take a little break, okay? So it's your responsibility to make sure that you feel okay, understood? Okay, excellent, then I can begin. So, first book, A Tale Dark and Grim. Just a little bit of background about that. So, I say it's a tale, you all know what a tale is, right? It's a story. And if I say that it's a dark tale, I don't mean that the lights are out, right? What do I mean if I say that it's a dark tale? Yes, sir?
Kind of freaky?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a freaky tale. And then I say that it's grim. Now, the word grim has got 2 meanings. I'm sort of making a joke, a pun, play on words. Who can tell me one meaning of the word grim? Yes, you. It is a kind of fairy tale. Exactly right. Do you know why it's called a grim fairy tale? Do you know why? Yeah. In fact, 2 guys who wrote them. And I'll tell you about those 2 guys in 1 minute. So that is one meaning of the word grim. And that's grim with 2 M's. Exactly right. And then there's grim with 1 M, which is a word. Any idea what the word grim means? Yeah? It does also mean creepy or dark. Have you ever heard of the Grim Reaper?
Yeah.
Is the Grim Reaper like a nice, sweet guy? No, he's not. He's like dark, and his name means death, right? So that's grim with 1 M is that word. It means sad, it means serious, it can mean death. And then grim with 2 M's is who you were talking about. So these 2 brothers, 200 years ago in Germany, there lived these 2 brothers. Jacob Grimm. Anyone here named Jacob? Any Jacobs? No? And the other one was named Wilhelm Grimm. Anyone here named Wilhelm? So Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm lived in Germany 200 years ago. And what they did was they traveled around Germany collecting fairy tales. And some people think that they made them up, but they did not make them up. They collected them. They'd go in and talk to moms, dads, nannies, babysitters. And they would get the best stories that these people knew, and they wrote them down. And while they liked the stories they got from moms, and they liked the stories they got from dads, they really liked the stories they got from nannies and from babysitters. And the reason is that moms and dads like to be kind of careful with their children, right? They don't want to upset them too much, right? Whereas nannies and babysitters are perfectly happy to scare the bejesus out of their children. I don't know if you've ever had a nanny or babysitter who tried to tell you scary stories before bed. I have been that. I've taken care of kids and done that, and it's fun. So the Brothers Grimm liked those kinds of stories, and they wrote them down. And you guys have heard of a lot of the stories by the Brothers Grimm. So for example, raise your hand if you've ever heard of a story called Little Red Riding Hood. Hands? Okay, good, down. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of a story called Snow White. Good, down. Cinderella. Good. Hansel and Gretel. Good. Sleeping Beauty. Good. Rapunzel. Good. Rumpelstiltskin. Good. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. You have not. Liars up here. The whole group is liars. Actually, there is a story called The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. It's about a mouse and a bird and a sausage. Yeah, they all talk to each other. It's very weird. I'm not going to tell you that story. But maybe you're thinking like, okay, I know Little Red Riding Hood. I know Snow White. These stories aren't dark and grim, right? They're not going to scare the bejesus out of anybody. Stories are cute and sweet and boring, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing is, I'm going to take questions at the end, okay? So hands down, and I would love to hear what you have to say in a bit. The thing is, the real Grimm fairy tales, the ones that were collected by these two brothers 200 years ago in Germany, were not cute and sweet and boring at all. They were very dark. And they caused allergies. And I'm going to tell you one of them right now. I'm going to prove to you that they were in fact quite dark and quite grim by telling you one right now. So this is a story that you guys have heard before. But my guess is you've never heard the real Grimm version of it. And you've certainly never heard me tell it. So, the story is called Cinderella. Now, it starts the way you think it's going to start. There's a girl, she lives with her stepmother and stepsisters. They're really, really mean to her. They make her clean the floors and wash the windows, and they never let her go outside or do anything fun. And they call her Cinderella. Now, the reason they call her Cinderella is because she's covered with cinders. In German, her name is Aschputtel. Yeah, German's weird. And because she's covered with ashes. What do you think her job would be around the house? What does she have to clean around the house that would get her covered with ashes and cinders? Do you think? What's your guess? Yes, sir.
Dust.
Dust is a good guess, yeah? What's yours?
The fireplace.
The fireplace, right? Ashes and cinders would be in the fireplace or the chimney. And that is most of the answer. But 200 years ago in Germany, there was something else that we don't have anymore that you had to clean that would get you covered with ashes and cinders. And that thing was a chamber pot. I don't know if you know what a chamber pot is, but I will tell you. A chamber pot is a toilet that does not flush. Right. Yeah, it's a little pot, and you leave it in the corner of your room, and you sit on the pot, and you do your business in the pot. And then you get up and you leave your business in the pot. And then somebody has to come and clean your business out of the pot with ashes and cinders and water. Right. So in other words, when they called her Cinderella, what they were actually calling her was toilet cleaner. Her name is toilet cleaner, and everybody would have known that 200 years ago. So the next time you see a little girl who's really excited for Halloween, and she's like, I'm gonna be Cinderella, I'm gonna be Cinderella. You know what she's actually saying is, I'm gonna be toilet cleaner. Don't tell her that, because she'll cry. So, anyway. So Cinderella had a terrible life, as you can imagine. But one day, an invitation comes from a prince. He's going to have a ball. He's going to dance with all the girls in the kingdom. Choose one to marry. Stepsisters are very excited. They have beautiful dresses, beautiful shoes. They can't wait to go to the ball. Cinderella, though, has no beautiful dress, no beautiful shoes. She's not going to be allowed to go. But she gets to go, doesn't she? Somebody gives her a dress and shoes. Who gives her the dress and the shoes? Call it out. The fairy godmother. That's right. And the fairy godmother's kind of plump, and she wears purple. She has little wings, and she goes bibbidi bobbidi boo, right? Okay. The thing is, in the real Grimm version of Cinderella, there is no fairy godmother. In the real Grimm version of Cinderella, every day of Cinderella's life, she goes to the grave of her real mother. Because her real mother has passed away, right? That's why she has a stepmother. She goes to the grave of her real mother and she weeps for how terrible her life is. And over time, her tears moisten the soil of the grave. And up out of the grave grows a tree, a hazel tree. And she goes to the tree every day and she weeps. And the day before the ball, she goes to the tree and she weeps and she wishes she could go to the ball, wishes she had a dress and shoes to wear. And as soon as she wishes for it, the tree shakes and throws down a dress and shoes to her. Now, some of you might be wondering, hold on, where does a tree get a dress, right? And the answer is, I have no idea, okay? It just happened, or it's beautiful. So she gets the dress and the shoes and she goes to the ball and she dances with the prince. He really, really likes her. He dances with her all night. But she knows that at midnight the dress is going to disappear. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a ball with a prince before, but if you have, you know that one thing that you should not be is naked, right? Not allowed, right? So before the dress disappears, she has to run away. So she runs away. So the next night she goes back and she dances with the prince. She gets another dress. I don't know where she gets it from. And he really, really likes her, and he dances with her all night. But again, midnight is approaching, and ball plus prince plus naked equals not okay, right? The third night, she goes back and she dances with this prince. And he's a clever prince. You'll see from this story, he's a smart guy. So as he's dancing with her, he has his servants go out to the steps of the palace, and smear the steps of the palace with tar. And tar is that black sticky stuff. We use it to make roads, like that black asphalt we have is made of this very sticky tar. So, as midnight approaches, she goes out the door, down the steps, and she steps on one of the sticky tar steps. And her shoe sticks. Now she keeps going, luckily, right? Because that whole prince naked thing. But the shoe stays behind. And the prince comes out, and he picks it up, and he looks at it, and he sees that it is made entirely, purely of glass. No. Usually it's made of glass. But in the Grimm version, it's made of gold. Pure gold. Which is pretty fancy, right? That's a nice shoe. That makes what's wrong with cheating, right? So he picks up the shoe, and he looks at it, and he says, "Whoever's foot fits in this golden shoe will be my bride." And he goes out to look for the girl. And he goes all around the kingdom, and pretty soon he comes to the house that Cinderella lives in. And now we are at the part of the story that gets a little bit grim. So get your fingers ready. So he comes to the house, and he says, "Whoever's foot fits in his golden shoe will be my bride." Well, the stepsisters are thrilled. Because you see, in a lot of versions of Cinderella, the stepsisters are ugly, right? Like one's like skinny like chicken bone, and one's like fat like a kettle. That looks particularly attractive, right? But in the Grimm version of Cinderella, the stepsisters are very, very beautiful. Probably more beautiful than Cinderella. Yeah? They're very beautiful, they're very proud of how beautiful they are, they love their fancy clothes, they love looking at themselves in the mirror, and they love to make fun of Cinderella for not being as beautiful and stylish as them. And they have perfect, beautiful little feet. So when the prince says, "Whoever's foot fits in this golden shoe will be my bride," they're thrilled. And the oldest stepsister flips her long golden hair and says, "Oh, let me try the shoe." And she goes, and she takes the golden shoe, and she goes into the back room, and the stepmother follows her back. And she slides her perfect, beautiful little foot into the golden shoe. And it fits.
What?
Well, almost. It almost fits. You see, her big toe is a little bit too big. She can't get it in the shoe. She tries and tries. The big toe just won't go all the way in. So the stepmother takes out a knife and says, "Cut off your toe. When you're queen, you won't have to walk anymore." Which is true, right? If she's queen, I guess people like carry her wherever she wants to go, right? Makes sense. So she takes the knife, cuts off her big toe, shoves her foot in the shoe, grits her teeth against the pane, and goes out to see the prince. Now, I like to picture this part of the story because she wants to impress this prince, right? And to impress him, she probably ought to smile. But it is not easy to smile when you have just cut off your toe and shoved your foot into a golden shoe, right? So that probably hurts, right? Like a lot. So if you would, right now, try to grit your teeth in unbearable pain and smile at the same time. Go. Yeah, good, excellent, excellent. Very nice. Yes, very good. Excellent, excellent. Those are great, yes. Okay, here's my impression of her. I think she looks like this, like so she goes out to see the prince. She's like, why is she limping? She just cut off her toe, exactly right. She goes out to see the prince, and she's like, and she goes, "It fits!" And the prince says, "My true bride." And he goes and he picks her up, and he carries her outside, and he puts her on his horse, and they ride away together. Yeah? But they haven't gone very far when they pass the cemetery with Cinderella's mother's grave. And on the grave is the hazel tree. And in the tree are sitting two doves. And as the prince and the stepsister ride by, these two doves call out. They call out, "Coo, coo, there's blood in the shoe. The foot's too long, the foot's too wide. This is not the proper bride." Well, the prince pulls up his horse and stops and listens to the birds, because when birds talk to you, you should listen, because it's weird. Okay. So he stops and he listens to the birds. He looks back at the stepsister with her long golden hair and her beautiful dress, and down to the golden shoe, and indeed, he sees blood burbling up out of the golden shoe. Right, I agree. And he goes, "This isn't the right girl." Because he's smart like that, right? I told you he was a clever prince, right? Figured that out. So, blood in the shoe. It's not the right girl. So he takes it around, takes the girl, turns the horse around, goes back to the house, and says, this isn't the right girl. Do you have another daughter? Well, they do have another daughter. The second stepsister flips her long black hair and says, oh, let me try the shoe. And she takes the golden shoe and she goes into the back room and the stepmother follows her back. And she slides her perfect, beautiful little foot into the golden shoe. And it fits.
What?
Almost. You're right. Yeah, you see, her heel is just a little bit too big. She can't get her heel in the shoe. She tries and tries and just will not go in. The back of your shoe, this part of your foot. So her stepmother, takes out a knife and she says, cut off a chunk of your heel. This is usually the point in the story when the teachers in the room start thinking, why did we let this guy talk to our students? It's completely inappropriate and not at all educational. In fact, I think even saw you guys look at each other at just that moment. So I knew it. Here's the thing. I agree with you that the story is completely inappropriate for children, but it's a little bit educational. So here comes the educational part, so kids, listen up. As a writer or a storyteller, we try to use good words, good nouns, good verbs that help us describe what's going on in the story. And a wonderful noun that I think you should all consider using in your writing in the future is the word chunk. Okay? A wonderful word, alright? Got it? Alright, end of educational part. You're welcome, teachers. So, she takes the knife, cuts off a chunk of her heel. Good work, man. Good work. You're choking them into the pain. Goes out to see the prince like this. Like. And she goes, defense! And the prince says, my true bride. And he goes and he picks her up, he carries her outside, he puts her on his horse, and they ride away together. But they haven't gone very far when they pass the cemetery, the grave, the tree, and the two doves. And the two doves call out again, they call out, coo, coo, there's blood in the shoe. The foot's too long, the foot's too wide. This is not the proper bride. The prince pulls up his horse and stops and listens to the birds, because again, birds talk, you should listen, right? And he looks back at the stepsister with the long black hair and her beautiful dress and down to the golden shoe. And indeed, he sees blood spurting up out of the shoe, staining the dress all red. And he goes, this isn't the right girl either. Because he's a genius, right? He's brilliant. So he takes the horse, turns it around, rides back to the house, and says, this isn't the right girl. Do you have another daughter? Well, they don't admit it. Cinderella's dirty. She's covered with ashes and cinders and whatever business you leave in a chamber pot. But the prince insists. She gets washed up, comes downstairs, tries on the golden shoe, and it fits perfectly. And the prince says, my true bride. And he picks her up, he carries her outside, he throws her on his horse, they ride away together, and they all live happily ever after. Almost. Almost. You see, they haven't gone very far when they pass the cemetery with the grave and the tree and the two doves, and the two doves call out again, but this time the doves call out, coo, coo, no blood in the shoe. The foot is neither long nor wide, this one is the proper bride. And they fly out of the tree and they come and they land on Cinderella's shoulders, one on her right shoulder, one on her left, and there they sit. They just sit there. Well, the next day, the whole kingdom comes to celebrate the wedding of Cinderella and the prince. And everybody's in the chapel with the prince, and Cinderella's outside, about to go in the chapel. When who should walk up to her but the two stepsisters? And they're limping a little bit, right? They smile at her and they say, dear Cinderella, we love you so much. We're so happy for you. We're so glad that you're marrying the prince. And now these girls have been mean to Cinderella for her whole life, right? All they've ever cared about is how beautiful they are and making fun of her, right? So, why are they being nice to her now? What do you think?
Because she married a prince.
She's going to be queen. She's going to be rich. She's going to be famous. They want some of that, right? Well, so Cinderella's nice. And she says, dear sisters, come, walk with me in my wedding. So the older stepsister stands on her right. The younger one stands on her left. And the two doves are still sitting on Cinderella's shoulders. And as Cinderella walks into the chapel, the dove on Cinderella's right shoulder leans over to the older stepsister and pecks out her left eye. And the dove on Cinderella's right shoulder leans over the younger stepsister and pecks out her right eye. And Cinderella Cinderella turns around to leave. Now you gotta try to picture this. Use your spatial reasoning skills here. When she turns around to go, the younger stepsister is now going to be on her right, and the older one is now going to be on her left, correct? So the two doves lean over and peck out their two remaining eyes. And the last line of the real Grimm version of Cinderella is, and so the stepsisters were punished with blindness till the end of their days for being so wicked and false. The end. And that really is the end of the real Grimm Cinderella. Thank you very much. That story, you guys were an excellent audience. That story comes from my book of the real Grimm fairy tales. This is my copy of the real Grimm fairy tales. And in it they have all the stories that you guys have heard of, but most of them have versions that you did not ever imagine. Quite great. What I did to write my books, A Tale Dark and Grimm and In a Glass Grimm, is I went through this one, and I found the darkest, the funniest, the bloodiest fairy tales that I could find. And I wove them together into one story. So as you guys know, this book is about two kids, a boy named Hansel and Gretel, right? And each chapter is based on a real Grimm fairy tale. This book is about two different kids. It's about a boy named Jack and a girl named Jill, exactly, and also a frog named Frog. And there's some salamanders too, if you've read some of this book. And this book is also based on Grimm fairy tales, as well as English fairy tales, like Jack and the Beanstalk and Jack the Giant Killer, and Hans Christian Andersen, a bunch of different kinds of fairy tales. So I'm about to let you ask questions. You're about to, like in 1 second, I'm almost finished my stuff. In fact, that's it. That's all I have to say about these books. But maybe you guys have some questions about the books that you've read, my book. Maybe you have questions about how you get to be a writer. Is it fun to be a writer? Why do you write such messed up stories? Any questions you got, I would be happy to answer. Let's go. Yes? How did Hansel turn into the wolf? That's a really good question. So they're in the forest of life, right? The Levenwald. So there's magic. There's a lot of magic going on there anyway, right? But the reason I wrote that chapter, and that story I based on a real Grimm fairy tale called Brother and Sister, but my version is very different from theirs. And in my version, Hansel can't control himself, right? He sees the little animals going by and just really wants to. I don't know if you've ever felt that way, but I definitely have felt that way. There have been times when I wanted something so bad and it was like I couldn't control myself. I get that way when I go into a store that sells lots of different kinds of chocolate, and also a video game store. That one. And it's almost like I turn into kind of like a wild animal a little bit. So I wanted to write about that feeling, and then since it was in a magical world, he could not only feel like a wild animal, he could turn into one. You know what I mean? Good question, man. Really good question. Yes?
Where do you come up with all these ideas? Do you have a special room, or a chair?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, if you didn't hear it, was where do I come up with these ideas? Do I have a special chair or a room? So the first place I go to get my ideas is this book. I go through this book and I find the stories that I love and I put them in a list. I'm like, I like that one and that one and that one and that one. But then I do have to come up with a lot more ideas. How am I going to rewrite them? How am I going to change them? How am I going to make them all fit together, right? And the most important place for doing that is the shower. Showers are a great place to figure out, because I'm just in the shower for hours, and just coming up with ideas. So the shower is really good for me. I also have a little garden behind my building that I sit in when it's sunny outside, and I think of ideas. I also really like to lie on the couch and stare at the ceiling. Those are my places. Good question. Yes, sir, in the back. Yeah.
Does everybody come back to life when you put the head back on the body?
In real life? No. Don't try it. It's not going to work for you. Only in the books, okay? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Why did you remember what Gretel liked her boyfriend?
Yeah, the handsome stranger.
Why did that boyfriend keep on eating human bodies?
Why did he eat human bodies? I tried to ask him that. He wouldn't give me a straight answer. No. That story is based on a real Grimm fairy tale called The Robber Bridegroom. And in that in that story, that's the same thing happens. He's people, and they never give an explanation. In a lot of the fairy tales, there are good characters and evil characters. And they never explain why they're evil. You know, he's a warlock, but we don't know why he does that, and he rips the souls out of the girls' bodies, right? And that part I made up. That's not the original fairy tale. That part I just thought was cool. So why does he do it? I don't know. He's just evil. Sometimes in stories, people are just bad. You know what I mean? Yes, sir.
Why did you add your own perspective?
Okay, why did it? That's a great question. So as you noticed in the book, I keep interrupting and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the way that came about with this. So I was a teacher. I taught 2nd grade, 5th grade, 9th grade, and 12th grade.
We're not teachers.
So I was a teacher, and one day I got a phone call from my school, and they asked me if I would be willing to be a substitute librarian for a day. And I was like, yes. Because librarian is one of the best jobs I can imagine. You get to hang out with kids all day long and share stories that you like with them. So I was like, yeah, I want to do that. They said, you're going to be reading stories to 2nd graders. I said, no problem. They said, read them any story you want. I said, great. So I went home and I was looking around my shelf for a good story to read to 2nd graders. And I came across this book, Grimm's Fairy Tales. And the thing is, I had never read this book. It had been on my shelf for years and years, and I had never read it. So I looked at it and I was like, oh, fairy tales. Those are perfect for little kids, right? So I opened up the story right here, the book, to a story called Faithful Johannes. And if you've ever read my book, you know that in this story, yeah, the 2 children get their heads cut off by their parents. So I read it and I was like, huh, can I read this to 2nd graders? Will I get fired? And then I thought, let's find out. So I brought the book in and I started reading it to the 2nd graders. And very quickly they started to get very nervous. I could see that they were getting nervous. So I would make a joke to help them calm down a little bit. Or I would warn them when something really terrible was about to happen. And then I think I did a pretty good job, because at the end I looked up and every kid had the same expression on his face. Every kid looked exactly like this, exactly like this. I was like, oh boy. So I dismissed the children. Some of them were crying. I think one of them whipped himself. But a few kids came up to me at the end, and they were like shaking. They were like, that was good. I was like, what? And they were like, you should make that into a book. And I was like, huh, maybe I should. But the thing is, it's already in a book, right? So I was like, how can I make it my own? So I was thinking about it, and one day, I remember this very clearly. I was in my apartment, I had my jacket on, my keys in my hand. I was halfway out my door, when I stopped. And I was like, I know how to make that into a book. And I came in and I sat down, I put my keys on my desk, my jacket was still on, I opened up my computer, and I started to write. And what I wrote was, that story I told those kids exactly as I had told it to them. All the jokes I made, all the warnings I gave them, I put all of that right into the book. So the reason that I keep like interrupting and talking to you and stuff is those are all those jokes that I first made to those 2nd graders to try to prevent them from peeing their pants. It didn't work, but I tried.